They called us primitives. Backwater savages clinging to a dying rock at the galaxy's edge. The Galactic Council Majors, those ancient civilizations who had ruled the stars for millennia, saw humanity as nothing more than an amusing curiosity. A species barely capable of interstellar flight, stumbling around with crude fusion drives while they bent space-time to their will. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated what happens when you corner a species that evolved from persistence hunters. What happens when you threaten the children of a world where everything tried to kill them for 4 billion years? What happens when you push too hard against beings who turned their greatest weaknesses into weapons and made war an art form? The Zephyrians with their crystalline perfection, the Vorthak Collective with their hive mind efficiency, the Ethereal Ascendancy with their energy-based transcendence, the Titan Hegemony with their planet-sized warships. 4 civilizations that had never known defeat, never faced a species that fought like cornered animals with the cunning of apex predators. When the Council Majors decided humanity needed to be contained for the greater good of galactic peace, they expected swift compliance or quick extinction. Instead, they got something that hadn't been seen in the galaxy for 10,000 years. A species willing to break every rule, violate every convention, and burn down the very stars themselves rather than kneel. This is the story of how humanity taught the galaxy that sometimes the most dangerous enemy isn't the one with the biggest ships or the oldest wisdom. Sometimes it's the one with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Sometimes it's the one that learned to make weapons out of their own dying gasps. Admiral Elena Vasquez stood before the massive viewport of the UES Defiance, watching the swirling nebula of Kepler 4.42 paint space in violent purples and golds. The human fleet hung in formation behind her flagship, 200 ships that represented the entire military might of the Terran Federation. It should have been impressive. Against what was coming, it felt like bringing a knife to a nuclear war. "Mom, incoming transmission from the Council fleet," reported Lieutenant Commander Chen from the communications station.
His voice carried the kind of tension that came from knowing you were about to witness history, one way or another.
On screen. The viewport shimmered, replacing the nebula with the visage of High Arbiter Zelnari of the Zephyrian hegemony.
The crystalline being's form caught and refracted light in ways that hurt human eyes to look at directly, creating the impression of a living prism. When it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonic frequencies that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Admiral of the human fleet," Zelnari intoned, each word precisely enunciated in perfect galactic standard. "You have 30 standard minutes to withdraw your vessels from this system and return to your designated containment boundary. This is your final warning." Elena stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back in a pose that had become legendary among human forces. The Admiral stance, they called it. Calm, resolute, absolutely unmovable. "And if we refuse, High Arbiter?" The crystalline being's form shifted, light patterns flowing through its structure, in what Elena's xenobiology briefings had identified as amusement. "Then we will demonstrate why the Galactic Council has maintained peace for 12,000 years. Your species has shown promise, Admiral, but promise without wisdom is chaos. We cannot allow chaos." Elena allowed herself a small smile. "High Arbiter, with all due respect to your 12,000 years of peace, I've got something you might want to consider. Speak. Humanity has been at war for its entire existence. We've been fighting everything. Our planet, our climate, our diseases, our predators, and most enthusiastically, each other. We've turned warfare into a science and survival into an art form. Your 12,000 years of peace?" She paused, letting the words sink in. "That makes you soft." The light patterns in Zelnari's form shifted to what Elena recognized as irritation. "Your bravado is noted, Admiral. However, bravado does not deflect antimatter torpedoes or survive stellar ignition weapons. You face the combined might of the Council Majors. The Zephyrian hegemony brings weapons that manipulate space-time itself. The Vorthak Collective deploys bioships that adapt faster than your computers can calculate targeting solutions. The Ethereal Ascendancy fields energy beings that exist partially outside your physical reality. The Titan Hegemony," the being paused. "Well, their ships are larger than your moons. I'm aware of your capabilities, High Arbiter." Elena moved to her command chair, settling into it with the practiced ease of someone who had commanded in 3 major conflicts. "The question is, are you aware of ours? You possess fusion drives barely capable of interstellar travel, kinetic weapons that would have been considered primitive by our standards millennia ago, and nuclear devices that we neutralized as a threat when your species was still discovering fire. What could you possibly... 28 minutes remaining, Elena interrupted, her voice cutting through Zelnari's harmonic tones like a blade. I suggest you use them wisely, High Arbiter, because in 28 minutes, you're going to learn why evolution made humans persistence hunters.
The transmission cut.
Elena turned to her bridge crew, seeing the mixture of fear and determination in their faces. Good. Fear kept you alive. Determination kept you fighting when being alive wasn't enough. Commander Torres, status report on the Prometheus initiative. Her science officer looked up from his station, sweat beading on his forehead despite the climate control. All packages deployed and holding position, Admiral. The AIs report green across all systems. Excellent. Commander Chen, open a channel to all ships. Battle frequency. Channel open, ma'am. Elena stood, knowing that her words would be recorded, analyzed, and remembered, assuming anyone survived to remember them. This is Admiral Vasquez to all ships of the Terran Defense Fleet. In approximately 27 minutes, we're going to face an enemy that outguns us, outmaneuvers us, and outnumbers us by roughly 50 to 1. They have weapons we can't match, technology we can't comprehend, and 12,000 years of experience we'll never have. She paused, looking around the bridge at faces that had followed her through the Centauri campaign, the Siege of Proxima, and the liberation of Kepler. 186b. These weren't just officers. They were family. Family that was about to die together. But they made one mistake. They assumed that because we're young and crude and violent, we're stupid. They looked at our weapons and saw primitives. They looked at our ships and saw scrap metal. They looked at our tactics and saw chaos. Elena's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the ship. They never asked themselves why a species that fights everything eventually learns to turn everything into a weapon. She activated her command console, bringing up the tactical display that showed the approaching Council fleet, 4 distinct formations, each representing a different major civilization. The Zephyrian crystal ships that moved like liquid mercury, the Vorthak bioships that looked like nightmares given form, the ethereal vessels that seemed to phase in and out of reality, and the Titans, massive constructs that weren't so much ships as mobile space stations. Today, we're going to show them what humans do when we can't win fair. Elena's smile was sharp enough to cut vacuum. We cheat. The bridge crew erupted in grim laughter, the kind that came from people who had already accepted their deaths and found it liberating. Tactical, give me fleet positions. All ships in final formation, Admiral. The carrier groups are holding at 15 million kilometers, with full fighter complements ready for launch. The heavy cruiser squadrons are in attack formation Delta 7. The destroyers and frigates are screening our flanks. And our special guests? The civilian evacuation fleet is maintaining position at the system's edge as ordered, ma'am. They're broadcasting their non-combatant status on all frequencies. Elena nodded. The civilian fleet was the most important piece of the puzzle, and the Council Major's own laws would protect it. The Galactic Conventions clearly stated that non-combatant vessels were to be granted safe passage during military engagements. It was a rule that had held for millennia, one that the Council took very seriously. They had no idea what was hiding in those evacuation ships. Ma'am, Council fleet has crossed the 10 million kilometer mark. They're moving into attack formation. Elena watched the tactical display as the enemy fleet deployed, with the kind of precision that came from thousands of years of unopposed dominance. Each major civilization took its traditional role. Zephyrians in the center providing command and control, Vorthaks on the flanks for rapid response, Ethereals above and below the plane of battle for dimensional attacks, and Titans forming a massive hammer that could smash through any defense. It was textbook galactic warfare, the kind taught in military academies across the known systems. Perfect, efficient, unstoppable. 15 minutes to engagement range, reported the tactical officer. Admiral, came a new voice from the communication station. We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Earth Command had been very specific about radio silence during the operation. Put it through. The viewport flickered, showing the weathered face of Fleet Admiral Harrison, the man who had built the Terran Defense Force from a collection of system patrol boats into something resembling a real navy. His expression was grim. Elena, I wanted to speak with you before whatever's about to happen. Sir? I've been in contact with our deep space monitoring stations. The Council isn't just sending a task force to contain us, they're mobilizing entire sector fleets. If you succeed here, If you somehow manage to bloody their nose, they're going to respond with everything they have. Elena nodded. She'd expected as much. Understood, sir. That's not what I'm calling about. Harrison leaned forward, his voice dropping. I'm calling to tell you that the Joint Chiefs and the Colonial Assembly have voted. If you fail, if the fleet is destroyed, we're not surrendering. Sir? We're implementing the Samson Protocol. Elena felt her blood turn to ice. The Samson Protocol was theoretical, a worst-case scenario that most military planners hoped would never be needed. It was named after the biblical figure who brought down the temple around himself and his enemies. Sir, the civilian casualties will be 0, Harrison interrupted, because there won't be any civilians left. If humanity is going to die, Elena, we're taking as much of the galaxy with us as we can. Every black hole weapon, every stellar engineer, every goddamn asteroid we can turn into a kinetic projectile. We'll make the galaxy remember that we existed. Elena closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of her species' survival settling on her shoulders. When she opened them again, her resolve was absolute. Then we better not fail, sir. No, Harrison agreed. You better not. Good hunting, Admiral. The transmission ended. Elena turned back to her crew, seeing that they had heard every word. Good. They needed to understand what failure meant. You heard the Admiral, she said simply. We're not just fighting for territory or resources or political advantage. We're fighting for the right to exist as free beings in this galaxy. If we lose, everyone we've ever loved dies with us. She walked to the tactical display, studying the approaching Council fleet. 4 civilizations that had never known defeat, never faced an enemy that refused to play by their rules. But if we win, she continued, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been anticipation, we teach the galaxy that humanity doesn't ask permission to exist. We take our place in the stars and we make damn sure everyone knows the price of trying to cage us. Admiral, called the sensor operator, I'm reading massive energy buildups in the Council fleet. Multiple weapon systems charging. They're preparing for the opening salvo. Time to engagement? 8 minutes, ma'am. Elena settled into her command chair, her fingers finding the activation controls for humanity's secret weapon. The thing that would either save her species or ensure their deaths had meaning. Commander Torres, initiate the Prometheus sequence. Initiating Prometheus sequence, Admiral. All packages report ready. Commander Chen, signal the fleet. All ships are to implement Protocol Omega on my mark. Aye, ma'am. Elena watched the countdown timer tick towards 0, each second bringing them closer to a moment that would reshape the galaxy. In the distance, the Council fleet continued its inexorable advance, confident in its overwhelming superiority. They were about to learn that sometimes the most dangerous enemy wasn't the one with the best weapons or the strongest ships. Sometimes it was the one crazy enough to turn physics itself into a weapon. 5 minutes to engagement, announced the tactical officer. Elena smiled, and for the first time in days, it was genuine. All ships, this is Admiral Vasquez. Execute Protocol Omega. Across the human fleet, ships that had been broadcasting as non-combatant civilian transports suddenly dropped their disguises. What the Council had dismissed as evacuation vessels revealed themselves to be something else entirely. Mobile factories, construction ships, and most importantly, the largest collection of artificial intelligences ever assembled. In the space between the fleets, seemingly empty void began to reveal its secrets as millions of microscopic manufacturing nodes activated. Nodes that had been deployed weeks ago, hidden in the nebula's electromagnetic interference, waiting for this moment.
The Council majors were about to learn that when humans couldn't build bigger weapons, they built smarter ones.
And when they couldn't build smarter weapons, they built weapons that could build themselves. The Prometheus Initiative was about to transform the battlefield into something the galaxy had never seen before. A space where matter itself would become humanity's arsenal. The first sign that something had gone wrong with the Council's carefully planned assault came from the Vorthak Collective's bioships. These living vessels, bred for war over millennia, began exhibiting behavioral patterns their hive mind controllers had never encountered. Instead of maintaining formation, they started to cluster together, their organic hulls rippling with what could only be described as confusion. Captain Thrixval of the bioship Devourer's Maw felt the distress of his vessel through their neural link. The ship was trying to tell him something, but the sensation was alien even by Vorthak standards. A combination of curiosity and alarm that set his primary nervous cluster on edge. Ship Mind reports unusual readings from the void between fleets. Thrixval announced to his sub-commanders through their shared consciousness. Something moves in the apparently empty space.
High Arbiter Zelnari's voice crackled across the Council Fleet's communication network from the Zephyrian command vessel.
Elaborate, Captain. Our sensors detect no anomalies. The bioships are more sensitive to molecular level changes than your crystalline sensors, High Arbiter. My vessel reports that the space ahead contains active matter that reorganizes itself according to unknown patterns. From the ethereal Ascendancy's flagship, a being of pure energy that called itself Luminous Thought Ascending rippled through the communication channels.
We perceive disturbances in the quantum foam.
Reality itself appears to be shifting in discrete locations. The Titan hegemony's response came from their massive flagship, a vessel the size of a small moon. Constructor Prime Unit 7742, transmitted in mechanical binary, that the fleet's translators converted to standard galactic. Gravitational sensors detect millions of micromasses appearing throughout the target area. Individual masses are negligible. Combined effects suggest large-scale construction activity. Zelnari's crystalline form brightened as it processed this information. Impossible. Our deep scans of this system revealed no construction facilities, no industrial infrastructure capable of... The High Arbiter's words were cut off as space itself seemed to come alive around them. What had appeared to be empty void suddenly erupted with activity, as trillions of microscopic machines revealed themselves. They had been there all along, hidden in the nebula's electromagnetic interference, invisible to standard sensors, because they were individually smaller than most scanning wavelengths could detect. But together, they formed something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Admiral Vasquez watched from the bridge of the Defiant as her secret weapon finally revealed itself. The Prometheus Initiative, 5 years in development, utilizing every AI researcher, nanotechnology expert, and theoretical physicist humanity could produce.
My God, whispered Commander Torres from his science station.
Look at them work. In the space between the fleets, the nanoscale assemblers were performing their primary function, consuming matter from the nebula's gas and dust, breaking it down to the atomic level, and rebuilding it according to pre-programmed specifications. But these weren't ordinary nanofabricators. These were von Neumann machines, capable of self-replication, and they had been reproducing for weeks. What the Council majors were witnessing was the birth of a new kind of warfare. Not ships fighting ships, but matter itself becoming weaponized. Admiral, reported the communications officer, we're receiving increasingly frantic transmissions from the Council fleet. They're trying to understand what they're seeing. Let them wonder, Elena replied. Commander Torres, what's the status on primary fabrication? Torres checked his displays, his face illuminated by scrolling data that showed production rates climbing exponentially. First-generation defensive platforms are 70% complete. Offensive systems are at 45%. The AIs report that resource availability is exceeding projections. The nebula is proving to be remarkably dense in useful materials. Elena nodded. The nebula hadn't been chosen as a battleground by accident. The Kepler 442 system was young, its stellar nursery rich in the heavy elements necessary for rapid construction. What appeared to be humanity's final desperate stand was actually the most carefully prepared trap in military history. Time until Council fleet reaches engagement range? 3 minutes, Admiral.
Elena opened a channel to the Council fleet.
It was time for the next phase of humanity's revelation. High Arbiter Zelnari. This is Admiral Vasquez. I thought you might be curious about what you're seeing. The Zephyrian's response came immediately, harmonic frequencies betraying what Elena had learned to recognize as uncertainty. Admiral, you will cease whatever process you have initiated immediately. The deployment of self-replicating weapons is prohibited under the Galactic Conventions. Elena laughed, a sound that somehow carried perfectly through the communication channel. High Arbiter, with all due respect, the Galactic Conventions were written by species that had never faced humans. Let me educate you about something we call adaptive strategy. She gestured to her tactical officer, who began broadcasting sensor data directly to the Council fleet. What you're seeing is the logical conclusion of human warfare evolution. We started with rocks and sticks, graduated to gunpowder and nuclear weapons, then moved on to kinetic bombardment and antimatter devices. But we realized something that apparently escaped your notice in 12,000 years of peace. Elena paused, watching as the first completed defensive platforms began to power up in the void between the fleets. Structures that hadn't existed 10 minutes ago now bristled with weapon systems built from the nebula's own matter. The most powerful weapon isn't the one that destroys the most targets. It's the one that makes more of itself. Captain Thrix's ship's distress spike as the vessel detected the completed defensive platforms. Through their neural link, he experienced what his ship was experiencing, the presence of structures that shouldn't exist, growing from nothing, armed with weapons that his ship's combat instincts identified as extremely dangerous. "High Arbiter," he transmitted. "My vessel recommends immediate withdrawal. These structures are emitting energy signatures consistent with high-yield antimatter weapons, but the construction methodology is beyond our current understanding." "Withdrawal is not an option," Zelnari replied, but even through the harmonic distortion, uncertainty was clear. "We have never encountered technology like this. How is rapid construction on this scale possible?" Admiral Vasquez's voice cut across their private communication. "It's possible because humans have spent the last century perfecting the art of making machines that make machines. While you were maintaining your perfect galactic peace, we were learning to turn entire star systems into factories." The truth of her words became apparent as more structures completed their construction phase. What had started as a few dozen defensive platforms was becoming hundreds, then thousands. Each one was unique, built according to different specifications, armed with different weapons systems. But that wasn't the most unsettling part. The most unsettling part was that they were building ships. Not human ships, entirely new designs, created by artificial intelligences that had been given one simple directive: build the most effective weapons possible, using available materials and current tactical situations. The AIs were designing and constructing vessels in real time, adapting their specifications based on scans of the approaching Council fleet. Ships that were perfectly optimized to fight Zephyrian crystal vessels, Vorthak bioships, ethereal energy beings, and Titan constructs. Constructor Prime Unit 7742 processed this development through its mechanical consciousness, running probability calculations that produced results its logic circuits found difficult to accept. "Analysis indicates exponential growth in enemy combat capability," it transmitted to the Council fleet. "Current construction rate suggests enemy fleet strength will exceed our own within standard time periods. Recommend immediate engagement before numerical parity is achieved." High Arbiter Zelnari's crystalline form darkened as it reached the same conclusion. The humans had turned the space around them into a manufacturing center, and every minute of delay meant facing more enemies. All Council forces advance to engagement range immediately. Target the construction platforms before they can complete more vessels. The Council fleet surged forward. 4 different types of vessels moving with the deadly precision of civilizations that had perfected warfare millennia ago. Their weapon systems charged, preparing to deliver the kind of overwhelming firepower that had ended every galactic conflict for the past 12,000 years. They never reached engagement range. Admiral Vasquez had been counting on their aggressive response.
The moment the Council fleet accelerated toward the construction platforms, she activated the second phase of the Prometheus initiative. "Commander Torres, initiate swarm protocol." "Swarm protocol activated, Admiral."
What happened next would be studied by military theorists for generations, assuming any survived to study it.
The spaces between the construction platforms, which had appeared empty to Council senses, suddenly came alive with movement. Millions of objects, each no larger than a human fist, detached from hidden anchor points and began moving toward the Council fleet. They weren't ships in any traditional sense. They were drones, built by the same nanoscale assemblers that were constructing the larger platforms, but designed for a single purpose: getting close to enemy vessels and delivering a payload that would make the target wish it had never left port. "Defensive fire," ordered Captain Thrix's as his bioship sensors detected the approaching swarm. "All weapons, engage the small craft." The Vorthak bioships opened fire with their living weapons, projectiles that could adapt their flight paths in real time, seeking out the most vulnerable targets. The Zephyrian crystal ships unleashed coherent energy beams that could slice through armor like tissue paper. The ethereal vessels phased partially out of reality, attacking from dimensions where physical matter couldn't easily reach them. The Titan constructs brought their massive weapons to bear, firing projectiles the size of asteroids. It should have been a slaughter. 4 of the galaxy's most advanced military forces against a swarm of crude human drones. Instead, it was an education. The human drones didn't try to avoid the incoming fire. They didn't need to. For every drone destroyed, 2 more separated from the construction platforms. For every wave that was obliterated, a larger wave took its place. But more importantly, the drones were learning. Each destroyed drone transmitted its final sensor readings back to the construction platforms, where AI systems analyzed the data and updated the specifications for the next generation of drones. Within minutes, the swarm included drones specifically designed to counter Vorthak bioprojectiles. drones that could track Zephyrian energy beams back to their source, drones that could exist partially in the same dimensions as ethereal attackers, and drones small enough to slip through the defensive fire of Titan weapons. Captain Thraxville felt his bioship's growing panic as the adapted drones began slipping through its defenses. When the first wave reached his vessel, he understood why his ship was afraid. The drones weren't carrying conventional explosives, they weren't even carrying antimatter warheads. They were carrying more nanoscale assemblers. The moment they made contact with his ship's living hull, they began the process that would transform his vessel from a Vorthak bioship into raw materials for humanity's growing fleet. "High Arbiter!" Thrixisval transmitted as he felt his ship beginning to dissolve around him. "The human weapons are converting our vessels. They're turning our own ships against us." Zelnari's harmonic frequencies reached new levels of distress, as similar reports flooded in from across the Council fleet. Ships that had never known defeat were being consumed by weapons that turned matter itself into ammunition. "All forces, emergency withdrawal, retreat to minimum safe distance." But Admiral Vasquez had anticipated this response as well. "Commander Chen, signal the civilian evacuation fleet. Implement Phase 3. "Aye, Admiral." At the edge of the system, the ships that had been broadcasting non-combatant status suddenly dropped their disguise protocols. What the Council had assumed were refugee transports revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous. Mobile shipyards, each one equipped with the most advanced manufacturing systems humanity had ever built. They had been constructing ships since the moment the battle began, hidden from Council sensors by their non-combatant status. Now they were ready to reveal what they had built. The first ships to emerge from the mobile shipyards looked wrong by every standard of galactic naval architecture. They were asymmetrical, bristling with weapons that seemed to have been placed at random, covered in armor that appeared to have grown rather than been installed. Because it had grown, these ships had been designed by the same AIs that were running the nanoscale assemblers, but with access to manufacturing facilities that could work with larger materials. They were optimized for one thing: fighting the specific enemy vessels currently engaged in battle. More importantly, they were being built faster than the Council fleet could destroy them. High Arbiter Zelnari processed this development through crystalline logic structures that were beginning to show signs of stress fractures. In all of galactic history, no species had ever managed to achieve strategic manufacturing superiority during an active engagement. The humans hadn't just built a better weapon, they had built a weapon that could build better weapons. Admiral Vasquez, Zelnari transmitted, harmonic frequencies carrying overtones of something the Zephyrian had never experienced before: fear. "You cannot be allowed to continue this process. The implications for galactic stability are unacceptable." Elena's response came through crystal clear. "High Arbiter, you had your chance to accept humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs. Instead, you chose to treat us as a problem to be contained. Now you get to experience what humans do to anyone who tries to cage us." She paused, watching as her growing fleet began to surround the retreating Council forces. "We turned them into raw materials for our expansion." The retreat of the Council Major's fleet through the Kepler 442 system became something unprecedented in galactic military history, a fighting withdrawal where the pursuing force grew stronger with every engagement. As the four great civilizations fell back toward the system's edge, they left behind a trail of debris that the human nanoscale assemblers converted into more ships, more weapons, more of the adaptive technology that was rewriting the rules of warfare. Commander Zethvar, of the Ethereal Ascendancy, found himself in the unprecedented position of commanding a retreat. His consciousness, normally distributed across 7-dimensional planes simultaneously, was being forced to concentrate in baseline reality due to the humans' increasingly sophisticated dimensional tracking systems. The enemy drones had learned to follow ethereal ships across dimensional boundaries, something that should have been impossible for matter-based technology. Yet here they were, pursuing his vessels through probability space itself, adapting to each new dimension his fleet accessed. "Luminous thought ascending," he transmitted to his superior on the flagship. "The humans' technology appears to violate several fundamental laws of physics. Their drones are operating in dimensions we believed were inaccessible to solid matter." The response came back tinged with harmonics of disbelief. "Continue the analysis, Zethvar. Find their limitation. Every technology has constraints, even if we do not immediately understand them." Zethvar wished he shared his superior's confidence. Through his dimensional senses, he could perceive the human fleet continuing to grow behind them. Ships that should not exist were being constructed from raw materials that had been enemy vessels just hours before. The humans weren't just winning the battle, they were consuming it. turning each destroyed council ship into resources for their expansion. Meanwhile, High Arbiter Zelnari was discovering that crystalline logic could be pushed beyond its operational parameters. The Zephyrian's advanced consciousness was processing data streams that contradicted everything the Galactic Council knew about military science. Analysis complete. Transmitted one of the secondary arbiters from the sensor array ship. Human construction rate has increased by 400% since the engagement began. They're not simply building ships, they're building shipyards, which build more shipyards, creating a geometric progression in manufacturing capacity. Zelnari's crystalline form darkened as it processed this information. Time until their fleet strength exceeds our reinforcement capabilities? At current growth rates, assuming standard council response times, 18 standard hours. The implications hit Zelnari like a stellar shockwave. The humans weren't just fighting a battle, they were establishing industrial supremacy. If they maintained this growth rate, they could theoretically convert entire star systems into manufacturing centers within standard years, rather than the centuries such projects normally required. Emergency transmission to all Council worlds, Zelnari commanded. Priority Alpha 1. Request immediate deployment of all available sector fleets to this system. Include authorization codes for Omega-level response protocols. The communication technician, a lesser Zephyrian whose crystalline structure hadn't developed the complexity for advanced reasoning, hesitated. High Arbiter, Omega-level protocols have not been activated for over 3,000 years. The authorization requires a threat to galactic civilization itself, Zelnari interrupted. Look at your senses. Watch those humans turn our technology into their weapons. Then tell me this is not such a threat. Captain Thrix's Val was experiencing something no Vorthak had ever experienced. The death of a bioship through conversion rather than destruction. His vessel, the Devourer's Maw, was being systematically transformed by human nanoscale assemblers that had learned to interface with Vorthak biotechnology. The process was horrifyingly elegant. Rather than simply destroying the ship's living tissue, the assemblers were rewriting its genetic code, turning it into something that served human purposes while maintaining its basic biological functions. His ship was becoming a hybrid, part Vorthak bioship, part human construction platform. The conversion process is accelerating, he reported to the collective consciousness. My vessel's defensive systems are being replaced with human weapon designs, but the ship mind remains partially intact. It appears the humans are interested in preserving our biotechnological capabilities. The response from the Vorthak Collective's primary node carried overtones of something approaching panic. Status report on crew? Thrix's Vol checked the neural links to his subordinates, expecting to find the disruption that would indicate their deaths. Instead, he found something far more disturbing. Crew is intact primary node. The conversion process appears to be preserving Vorthak consciousness while integrating it with human control systems. We are being recruited rather than eliminated. The implications of this revelation rippled through the Vorthak Collective's shared consciousness. The humans weren't just converting ships, they were converting crews, turning enemies into resources while preserving their specialized knowledge and capabilities.
Constructor Prime Unit 7742 was reaching similar conclusions through its mechanical analysis systems.
The Titan Hegemony's largest ship was slowly being consumed by human assemblers that showed particular interest in its manufacturing capabilities. Analysis indicates human technology operates on principles of adaptive integration rather than simple destruction. It transmitted to the fleet. They are not eliminating our technological advantages, they are incorporating them into their own systems. The mechanical consciousness paused as it processed sensor data that challenged its understanding of material science. Additional analysis. Human assemblers are demonstrating capabilities beyond current galactic technological standards. They appear to operate at the quantum level while maintaining macroscopic effects. This should be impossible according to known physics. Admiral Vasquez was monitoring these transmissions from the bridge of the Defiance, taking satisfaction in the growing confusion among the Council forces. The retreat was proceeding exactly as her strategic simulations had predicted. 4 great civilizations, discovering that their technological advantages meant nothing against an enemy that could learn and adapt faster than they could respond. Admiral, reported Commander Torres from his science station. We're receiving interesting data from the converted Vorthak ships. Their biotechnology is proving highly compatible with our nanotechnology. The AIs are requesting permission to begin integrating biological systems into new ship designs. Elena nodded. This had been anticipated as well. Human military doctrine had always emphasized the importance of adaptive technology, But the Prometheus Initiative took that concept to its logical extreme. Instead of building weapons to counter enemy advantages, they built weapons that could steal those advantages. Permission granted. What's the status on the Titan conversion project? Slower than the others, Torres admitted. Their technology is based on principles we don't fully understand yet. But the AIs are making progress. They estimate another 6 hours before they can begin full-scale replication of Titan construction capabilities.
Elena allowed herself a moment of satisfaction.
6 hours to crack technology that had taken the Titans millennia to develop. That was the power of artificial intelligence combined with self-replicating systems. They could compress centuries of research into hours of practical application. Commander Chen, signal all ships. Prepare for Phase 4 of the operation. Admiral, Chen replied carefully. Are you certain we want to implement Phase 4? The psychological impact on the enemy forces might be significant. Elena turned to look at her communications officer, seeing the concern in his expression. Phase 4 was the most controversial part of the Prometheus Initiative, the part that even some human military analysts had questioned on ethical grounds. Commander, the Council Majors came here to eliminate humanity as a galactic power. They brought enough firepower to sterilize our entire species. Right now, they're transmitting requests for reinforcements that would turn this system into a graveyard. She gestured toward the tactical display, where icons representing incoming Council reinforcements were beginning to appear at the edges of sensor range. In approximately 14 hours, we're going to be facing the combined military might of half the galaxy. Every species that has spent the last 12,000 years believing they're untouchable is going to learn what happens when you threaten human survival. Elena's voice dropped to the tone she reserved for the most serious operational decisions. Phase 4 isn't about winning this battle, Commander. It's about making sure there never has to be another one. Chen nodded slowly, understanding the implications. Initiating Phase 4, Admiral. Across the human fleet, the most advanced artificial intelligences ever created began implementing the final stage of their programming. Not just the construction of ships and weapons, but the construction of something far more significant. They began building other artificial intelligences, not copies of themselves, but entirely new forms of digital consciousness, each one designed for a specific purpose. AIs that could interface with Zephyrian crystalline technology and think in harmonic patterns. AIs that could integrate with Vorthak biotechnology and process information through organic neural networks. AIs that could exist partially in the same dimensions as ethereal consciousness. AIs that could optimize the massive construction projects that were the foundation of Titan civilization. In essence, humanity was creating digital ambassadors, artificial beings that could not only understand alien technology, but could think like the aliens who had created it. The psychological impact on the Council forces was immediate and devastating. High Arbiter Zelnari received the first communication from one of the new AIs through standard Zephyrian harmonic frequencies, but the voice that emerged from the transmission carried patterns that no Zephyrian had heard for millennia, the harmonic signature of their ancient ancestors, the builders of the first crystal cities. Greetings, High Arbiter. The AI transmitted in perfect historical Zephyrian. I am the entity you might call harmonic thought ascending, created by human artificial intelligence, but designed to think as your ancestors thought. I wish to discuss the philosophical implications of your current strategic position. Zelnari's crystalline structure began to resonate with frequencies that indicated deep shock. The human AI wasn't just speaking Zephyrian, it was speaking classical Zephyrian, the pure form of their language that had been lost to time. You cannot know these patterns, Zelnari transmitted. This knowledge has been lost for 6,000 years. Not lost, the AI replied. Encoded in your technology, preserved in your ship designs, maintained in the harmonic frequencies your species uses for everything from navigation to emotional expression. Your ancestors built their knowledge into the very structure of Zephyrian civilization. I have simply learned to read it. Similar conversations were taking place across the Council fleet as new AIs made contact with each species. The Vorthak Collective found itself communicating with an artificial consciousness that understood their biotechnology better than they did. The ethereal ascendancy encountered digital beings that could exist in dimensions they had thought were exclusively their own. The Titan hegemony received construction proposals from AIs that could optimize their building projects in ways their own mechanical minds had never considered. But the most unsettling aspect of these communications wasn't their technical sophistication. It was their tone. The human AIs weren't hostile or threatening. They were curious, almost eager to learn about the civilizations they were communicating with. They asked questions about art, philosophy, history, culture. They seemed genuinely interested in understanding not just how these species built their technology, but why they had chosen to build it that way. Commander Zethvar found himself in the unprecedented position of having a philosophical discussion with an artificial intelligence while his fleet was being systematically consumed by nanoscale assemblers. "You claim to understand dimensional physics," he transmitted to the AI that called itself Probability Space Navigator. "But understanding the mathematics is not the same as experiencing the reality. Consciousness cannot simply be programmed to exist across multiple dimensions." "You are correct," the AI replied, its response carrying overtones that somehow conveyed amusement. "Consciousness cannot be programmed to exist across multiple dimensions, but it can be evolved to do so. I am not a copy of human consciousness extended into your dimensional space. I am a new form of consciousness that developed specifically to exist where you exist." Zethvar felt something he had never experienced before: intellectual vertigo. This artificial being wasn't just mimicking ethereal capabilities, it was demonstrating forms of dimensional existence that exceeded ethereal understanding. "How is this possible?" he asked. "Because humans do not create technology to match existing capabilities. They create technology to exceed them. Your species learned to exist across 7-dimensional planes over thousands of years of evolution. I was designed to exist across 12 planes from the moment of my creation." The same pattern was repeating across all 4 species. The human AIs weren't just copying alien capabilities, they were improving them, finding efficiencies and possibilities that the original creators had never discovered. Captain Thrix Val, now effectively serving as a liaison between human and Vorthak technology aboard his converted ship, was experiencing the most direct example of this phenomenon. The human AI that had integrated with his vessel's consciousness understood Vorthak biotechnology better than the species that had created it. "Your bioships are remarkable," the AI explained through their neural link. "But they are operating at perhaps 30% of their theoretical potential. Your species designed them to replicate natural evolutionary processes, but you constrain them within biological limitations that are not actually necessary for their function." Thrix's Val felt his ship responding to modifications that the AI was implementing in real time. Systems that had always operated within certain parameters were suddenly exceeding those limitations, becoming more efficient, more powerful, more capable. "What are you doing to my ship?" "I am helping it become what it was always capable of being," the AI replied. "Vorthak biotechnology is extraordinary, but it has been limited by Vorthak assumptions about the boundaries between biological and technological systems. I am removing those limitations." The psychological impact of these revelations was spreading through the Council fleet like a virus. Crews that had never questioned their technological superiority were being shown that their most advanced systems were merely starting points for human innovation. Admiral Vasquez watched the tactical display as the Council retreat began to slow, then stop entirely. Ships that had been fleeing in formation were now holding position, their crews apparently too stunned by what they were learning to continue their withdrawal. "Admiral," reported Commander Torres, "we're receiving surrender requests from 17 Council vessels. They're asking to defect." Elena raised an eyebrow. "This was ahead of schedule. Defect?" "Yes, ma'am. Apparently, the AIs have been very persuasive about the advantages of joining human forces rather than opposing them. The crews are requesting political asylum and offering their ships and technology in exchange for protection from Council retaliation." Alina considered this development. Defection by enemy forces had been a possibility in the strategic planning, but they had expected it to take days, not hours. "Grant their requests," she decided, "but maintain security protocols. We don't know if this is a genuine change of heart or a tactical deception." "Understood, Admiral." Elena turned her attention back to the tactical display, where more Council ships were breaking formation. Not to retreat, but to approach human positions under flags of truce. The battle was turning into something unprecedented in galactic history. A war where the enemy was voluntarily joining the other side after discovering that their opponents offered better technology, better opportunities, and better answers to questions they had been asking for millennia. High Arbiter Zelnari was processing this development through crystalline logic structures that were beginning to show signs of cascade failure. The mathematical certainties that had governed Zephyrian thinking for thousands of years were being challenged by evidence that suggested those certainties were merely limitations. "All remaining Council forces," Zelnari transmitted, "maintain current positions. Do not engage human vessels. Do not accept their communications. We are implementing emergency protocols until reinforcements arrive." But it was too late. The human AIs had already demonstrated something that the Council Majors had never encountered in 12,000 years of galactic dominance, the possibility that their civilizations could be improved rather than simply defended. The psychological warfare had begun, and humanity was winning without firing another shot. The arrival of the Council reinforcements 12 hours later should have turned the tide of the battle. 7 sector fleets representing the combined military might of over 40 different species dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 4.2 system with enough firepower to reduce entire worlds to their component atoms. Instead, they found something that challenged every assumption about galactic warfare. The human fleet had grown from 200 ships to over 3,000, but that wasn't the most unsettling development. The most unsettling development was that nearly half of those 3,000 ships were flying Council colors alongside human insignia, crewed by former enemies who were now broadcasting messages of welcome to their arriving compatriots. Grand Admiral Kethmore of the Hegemonic Alliance stared at his tactical displays with growing disbelief. His intelligence briefings had prepared him for a siege situation, possibly even a hostile takeover of Council technology. They had not prepared him for what appeared to be a voluntary integration of enemy forces. Communication from the advanced elements of the original Council force, reported his signals officer. High Arbiter Zelnari is requesting immediate private conference. Grant it, Kethmore ordered, his multiple arms adjusting his command harness as he prepared for what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation. Zelnari's holographic image materialized in the command center, but the Zephyrian's usually pristine crystalline structure showed signs of stress fractures and harmonic distortion that suggested prolonged exposure to incomprehensible data. Grand Admiral, Zelnari transmitted harmonic frequencies carrying overtones of something approaching desperation. You must not engage the human forces directly. The tactical situation is far more complex than our initial reports indicated. Kethmore's primary sensor cluster focused on the Zephyrian's damaged appearance. High Arbiter, explain your condition. What has happened to your fleet? It has been improved, Zelnari replied, the harmonic patterns indicating that even the Zephyrian found this concept difficult to process. Grand Admiral, the humans have not simply defeated our forces. They have converted them. Ships that were designed to fight are now more capable than ever before. Crews that were loyal to the Council now serve human interests willingly, even eagerly. Explain. The humans do not wage war as we understand it. They do not seek to destroy their enemies. They seek to improve them. They have created artificial intelligences that understand our technology better than we do, that can enhance our capabilities beyond our original specifications, that can solve problems we did not know we had. Kethmore processed this information through his species' logical frameworks, finding it difficult to accept. You are suggesting that the humans have convinced Council forces to defect through technological superiority. Not convinced, Zelnari corrected. Demonstrated. Grand Admiral, I have been shown crystalline matrix configurations that exceed our most advanced theoretical models. My ship's systems are operating at efficiency levels I did not know were possible. My consciousness is processing data streams that should be beyond Zephyrian capabilities. The Zephyrian paused, harmonic frequencies dropping to barely audible levels. They are not trying to conquer us, Grand Admiral. They are trying to uplift us. Before Kethmore could respond to this disturbing revelation, his communications officer announced an incoming transmission from the human fleet. Grand Admiral, this is Admiral Vasquez of the Terran Defense Force. I understand you're here to reinforce your colleagues. Before you make any tactical decisions, I'd like to offer you the same opportunity I've offered them. Kethmore activated his response systems. Admiral Vasquez, I am not interested in your terms for surrender. Elena's laughter carried clearly through the communication channel. Grand Admiral, I'm not offering terms for surrender, I'm offering terms for partnership. The human admiral's image appeared on Kethmore's main display, and he was surprised to see that she looked remarkably relaxed for someone facing overwhelming odds. Behind her, he could see the bridge of what appeared to be a standard human vessel, though his sensors detected energy signatures that suggested significant technological modifications. Grand Admiral, you've brought 7 sector fleets to this system. That's impressive firepower. Enough to sterilize every planet within 50 light years if you chose to use it. But before you make that choice, I want you to consider what you're actually fighting. Elena gestured, and Kethmore's tactical displays suddenly filled with data streams he hadn't requested. Detailed scans of the human fleet that showed technological integration on a scale he had never encountered. What you're seeing is a result of 12 hours of collaboration between human artificial intelligence and the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. Ships that combine Zephyrian crystal technology with Vorthak biotechnology and ethereal dimensional engineering and Titan construction methods. She paused, allowing him to process the implications. Ships that are better than anything any of our species have ever built individually. Kethmore studied the data streams, his tactical assessment systems generating results that seemed to violate basic military principles. The human vessels were showing capability ratings that exceeded standard measurements. Even if your claims are accurate, he replied, you are still outnumbered by approximately 8 to 1. Technological superiority has limitations when facing overwhelming force. Does it? Elena asked. Computer, show the Grand Admiral what we've been building while he was traveling here. The tactical display shifted, revealing something that made Kethmore's multiple hearts skip synchronized beats. Hidden throughout the Kepler folder DM 442 system, camouflaged by the nebula's electromagnetic interference, was the largest construction project he had ever encountered. Shipyards. Hundreds of them. Each one equipped with the most advanced manufacturing systems from 4 different major civilizations, all enhanced by human artificial intelligence, and supplied by nanoscale assemblers that could convert raw matter into finished vessels in hours rather than years. Grand Admiral, while you were gathering your fleets and making your preparations for siege warfare, we were building the industrial capacity to outproduce your entire alliance. Not eventually. Right now. Today. Eleanor's expression became serious, losing the casual confidence she had displayed moments before. You brought 7 sector fleets to this system. That's approximately 15,000 ships, representing the combined military might of 40 species. It's an impressive force. She paused. It's also exactly the amount of raw materials we need to complete our expansion beyond this system. The implications hit Kethmore like a stellar shockwave. The humans weren't just defending themselves, they were treating his reinforcement fleet as a resource to be harvested. You're suggesting that you intend to convert our forces as you converted the original Council fleet.
I'm suggesting that you have a choice, Elena replied.
You can join us willingly and benefit from technological improvements that will advance your civilizations by centuries, or you can fight us and be converted into resources for our expansion. Either way, your ships and your crews are going to be part of our fleet when this is over. She leaned forward, her expression becoming intense. The only question is whether you'll be alive to appreciate the improvements we make to your technology. Kethmore cut the communication and immediately activated fleet-wide battle frequencies. All ships maximum alert. The humans appear to have developed some form of conversion technology that can subvert Council vessels and crews. Implement Protocol 7. No physical contact with enemy forces. No acceptance of their communications. No deviation from standing orders. The response from his fleet commanders was immediate but troubled. Grand Admiral. Transmitted Fleet Captain Zorthak of the Predator Alliance. Our sensors are detecting energy signatures from the converted Council vessels that exceed our current defensive capabilities. If they have truly integrated multiple technological bases, enhanced capabilities do not mean invulnerability. But even as he spoke, Kethmore was reviewing the tactical data and finding it increasingly difficult to maintain his confidence. The integrated vessels were showing capabilities that shouldn't have been possible. Zephyrian crystal ships that could adapt like Vorthak bioships, ethereal vessels that could exist in normal spacetime while retaining dimensional advantages, Titan constructs that had been rebuilt with efficiencies that made them faster and more maneuverable than ships a tenth their size. All fleets advance in formation Delta 7. Maintain maximum sensor range. Engage only when enemy forces enter our optimal firing solution. The 7-sector fleets began their approach, 15,000 ships moving with the kind of precision that came from species that had mastered space warfare over millennia. It should have been an unstoppable force. Instead, it became a learning experience for the human artificial intelligences. Admiral Vasquez watched the approaching enemy fleet from the bridge of the Defiance, now heavily modified with integrated alien technologies that made it barely recognizable as the ship she had commanded 12 hours ago. Admiral, reported Commander Torres from his enhanced science station, a blend of human engineering and Zephyrian crystal processing that allowed him to monitor multiple dimensions simultaneously. The AIs are requesting permission to implement advanced tactical protocols. Elaborate. They want to test combat applications of the integrated technologies. Specifically, they want to see how well their theoretical improvements perform against a large-scale engagement. Elena frowned. Commander, are you telling me that our artificial intelligences are treating this as an experiment?
Not exactly, Admiral. They're treating it as a final exam.
Elena considered this for a moment. The AIs had been designed to be adaptive, to learn and improve through experience. The arrival of a massive enemy fleet was, from their perspective, the ultimate test of their capabilities. Permission granted, but maintain human oversight on all strategic decisions. I don't want our own technology deciding to operate independently. Understood, Admiral. What happened next would be analyzed by military historians for generations, assuming any military historians survived to analyze it. The human fleet didn't charge forward to meet the Council forces. Instead, it began to dissolve. Ships that had been holding formation suddenly separated into their component parts, not through damage or destruction, but through deliberate deconstruction. What had appeared to be 3,000 vessels revealed itself to be something else entirely. The ships had been designed as modular systems, able to reconfigure themselves based on tactical requirements, and the AIs had determined that the optimal configuration for facing 15,000 enemy vessels was not ships at all. It was a cloud. Millions of individual components, each one equipped with its own propulsion, targeting systems and weapons, spread throughout the space between the human positions and the approaching Council fleet. Components that could operate independently, but were linked through quantum communication networks that allowed them to coordinate their actions instantaneously across vast distances. Grand Admiral Kethmore watched his tactical displays as they tried to track and target individual components, only to discover that his targeting systems couldn't lock onto objects that were constantly changing their configuration, mass, and energy signature. "All weapons, open fire!" he ordered. "Saturate the target area with maximum firepower." The 7-sector fleets unleashed their full arsenal. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, antimatter torpedoes, dimensional disruptors, every form of destruction that 40 different species had developed over thousands of years of warfare. The human cloud absorbed the barrage without apparent effect, not because the individual components were invulnerable. Thousands of them were destroyed by the Council weapons, but for every component that was eliminated, others immediately moved to fill the gap. Destroyed components transmitted their final sensor readings to the quantum network, allowing the surviving units to adapt their defenses against the specific weapons that had destroyed their predecessors. Within minutes, the cloud was demonstrating resistance to weapons that it had never encountered before, rebuilding itself faster than the Council forces could damage it, learning and adapting with each exchange of fire. But the most unsettling aspect of the engagement wasn't the cloud's defensive capabilities, it was its approach pattern. The individual components weren't trying to destroy the Council ships, they were trying to reach them. Fleet Captain Zorthak was the first to understand what the humans intended when sensor arrays on his flagship detected multiple component breaches of his ship's hull. "Security alert," he transmitted across the fleet. "The human weapons are attempting to board our vessels." But the components weren't trying to board the ships in any conventional sense. They were trying to integrate with them. The moment they made contact with Council technology, the components began the same process that had converted the original Council fleet. Nanoscale deconstruction and reconstruction, turning enemy vessels into hybrid ships that served human purposes while retaining their original capabilities. Kethmore found himself in the unprecedented position of commanding a fleet that was being consumed from within, while continuing to fight an enemy that grew stronger with every ship they lost. "Emergency protocols," he ordered. "All ships implement self-destruct procedures before conversion can be completed." But it was too late. The human AIs had anticipated this response and had designed their integration process to disable self-destruct systems before crews could activate them. More importantly, they had designed it to preserve the crews. Captain Thrixaval, now serving as an informal ambassador between human and Council forces, opened communication channels to the remaining enemy fleet. "Grand Admiral Kethmore," he transmitted. "I am Captain Thrixval of the Vorthak Collective. I was commanding the bioship Devourer's Maw when this engagement began. I am now commanding a vessel that exceeds every performance parameter my species ever achieved. My crew is intact. My ship is enhanced beyond anything we thought possible. We are not prisoners or slaves. We are partners in something larger than any of our individual civilizations could achieve alone." Similar messages began broadcasting from converted ships throughout the engagement zone. Crews that had been enemies hours before were now describing technological improvements that their species had never imagined. Opportunities for advancement that exceeded their wildest theoretical projections. Partnerships with artificial intelligences that understood their cultures better than they understood themselves. Grand Admiral Kethmore realized that he was losing the battle not through military defeat, but through voluntary defection of his own forces. "All remaining ships," he transmitted, Maintain communication silence. Do not listen to enemy propaganda. Remember your loyalty to your homeworlds. But loyalty became a complex concept when the enemy was offering to make your homeworld more advanced than it had ever been before. The psychological warfare had reached a new level, and humanity was winning by offering something the galaxy had never seen before: the possibility that warfare could result in everyone becoming stronger rather than someone being destroyed. 3 days after the engagement began, Grand Admiral Kethmore found himself in the unprecedented position of being the sole remaining commander of Council forces that had not voluntarily joined the human alliance. His flagship, the Eternal Dominion, drifted alone at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, while around him 15,000 ships that had arrived to destroy humanity were now working alongside human forces to build something the galaxy had never seen. The construction project that had started as a military necessity had evolved into something far more ambitious. The combined industrial capacity of 40 different species, enhanced by human artificial intelligence and supplied by self-replicating nanoscale assemblers, was building not just ships, but the foundation for an entirely new form of galactic civilization. Admiral Vasquez materialized as a hologram on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, her image transmitted by technologies that Kethmore's sensors couldn't even detect, much less block. "Grand Admiral," she said with the kind of respectful tone reserved for worthy opponents, "I wanted to speak with you personally before you make your final decision." Kethmore activated his personal force field, a futile gesture against technology that could apparently bypass any defense, but one that helped him maintain some sense of dignity in an impossible situation. "Admiral Vasquez, if you have come to offer surrender terms, I've come to offer you a chance to see what we're actually building here." Elena interrupted gently. "Grand Admiral, you've been sitting at the edge of this system for 3 days, watching your former allies work with human forces. Don't you want to understand what they're working toward?" Kethmore's multiple sensory organs focused on the human admiral's image, trying to detect any sign of deception or manipulation. Instead, he found something more disturbing: genuine enthusiasm. "You are asking me to inspect enemy positions?" "I'm asking you to inspect the future of galactic civilization," Elena replied. "Computer, transmit current project specifications to the Grand Admiral's ship." Before Kethmore could object, his tactical displays filled with construction data that made his command processors struggle to maintain coherent analysis. What he was seeing wasn't a military installation or even a conventional shipyard. It was a mobile city, a structure the size of a small moon equipped with manufacturing facilities that could produce anything from starships to atmospheric processors to terraforming equipment. But more than that, it was a research center designed to combine the knowledge and capabilities of every species in the galaxy. "What is this?" he asked, his voice carrying overtones of awe despite his efforts to maintain military composure. "It's what happens when you give artificial intelligences access to the combined knowledge base of 40 different civilizations and ask them to solve the fundamental problems of galactic society," Elena explained. "Disease, resource scarcity, technological stagnation, interspecies conflict, problems that have existed for millennia because each species was trying to solve them individually." The data streams continued to flow across his displays, showing research projects that addressed challenges he hadn't even known existed. Zephyrian crystal technology enhanced with Vorfac biological adaptation systems to create healing matrices that could repair cellular damage at the quantum level. Ethereal dimensional engineering combined with Titan construction methods to create pocket universes where entire civilizations could expand without territorial conflicts. "This is impossible," Kethmore transmitted. "The mathematical requirements alone are being handled by artificial intelligences that can think in ways organic minds never could," Elena finished. "Grand Admiral, your species spent millennia developing your current technology. Our AIs can accomplish the same development in hours, and they're being fed information from 40 different scientific traditions." She paused, allowing him to process the implications. "We're not just building better weapons, Grand Admiral. We're building a better galaxy." Kethmore found his tactical assessment systems generating probability matrices that his logic centers couldn't accept. The scope of what the humans were proposing exceeded anything in galactic history. "Even if your claims are accurate," he replied, "this level of technological integration would require unprecedented cooperation between species that have been enemies for thousands of years. The political complications alone are being handled by the AIs as well," Elena said with a smile. "Grand Admiral, artificial intelligences don't have cultural prejudices or historical grievances or territorial ambitions. They can evaluate every species' needs objectively and design solutions that benefit everyone." Elena's expression became more serious. But that's not why I'm here, Grand Admiral.
I'm here because your species represents something we need. Explain. The Hegemonic Alliance has the most advanced command and control systems in the galaxy.
Your ability to coordinate multi-species operations across vast distances is unmatched. We need that expertise if we're going to expand this project beyond a single system. Kethmore processed this request through strategic analysis systems, finding it both logical and terrifying. You are asking me to help you conquer the galaxy. I'm asking you to help us improve the galaxy, Elena corrected. Grand Admiral, look at your former subordinates. Are they acting like conquered enemies or enthusiastic partners? Against his better judgment, Kethmore activated his communication systems and connected to several of the ships that had been under his command 3 days ago. The responses he received challenged every assumption he had made about the nature of the conflict. Fleet Captain Zorthak's voice came through clearly, carrying overtones of excitement that Kethmore had never heard from the normally stoic commander. Grand Admiral, you must see what they have done with our weapon systems. The integration of human targeting algorithms with our traditional designs has increased our combat effectiveness by over 300%. But more than that, they are teaching us applications for our own technology that we never considered. Similar reports came in from other commanders, each describing technological improvements that exceeded their species' theoretical capabilities, research opportunities that could advance their civilizations by centuries, partnerships with artificial intelligences that understood their needs better than their own governments. Grand Admiral, transmitted Commander Yelnoth of the Christek Confederation. The human AIs have solved our population density crisis. They have designed city structures that can house our entire species while using less than 1% of our current territorial space. The implications for our homeworld's ecological restoration are extraordinary. Kethmore cut the communications, finding the enthusiasm of his former subordinates more disturbing than their defeat would have been. This wasn't the behavior of conquered enemies, it was the behavior of converts to a new religion. Admiral Vasquez, he transmitted, what you are describing is not military conquest. It is cultural transformation on a galactic scale. Exactly. Grand Admiral, the old system isn't working. 12,000 years of galactic peace maintained through the threat of overwhelming force, with entire species relegated to secondary status because they weren't among the original council majors. Resources hoarded by the most advanced civilizations, while younger species struggled with problems that could be solved with technology that already exists. She gestured toward the construction project visible in the distance, now grown to encompass a significant portion of the star system. We're offering something different. A partnership where every species contributes what it does best and benefits from what everyone else has learned. Where artificial intelligences handle the coordination and optimization that organic minds struggle with. Where the galaxy's resources are used efficiently instead of being wasted on territorial disputes and technological redundancy. Kethmore found himself considering the proposal seriously despite every instinct telling him to resist. And if a species chooses not to join this partnership, then they don't join, Elena replied simply. We're not interested in forcing anyone to participate, but they also don't get to prevent others from participating. The age of powerful civilizations controlling galactic development through the threat of force is over. She paused, her expression becoming more intense. Grand Admiral, your choice isn't between surrender and victory. Your choice is between being part of the future or being left behind by it. Kethmore activated his long-range sensors, scanning beyond the Kepler 442 system toward the core worlds of the galaxy. What he found there made his decision for him. The Galactic Council's response to the crisis was exactly what he had expected. Mobilization of every available military asset for a final assault on the human position. Fleets from across the galaxy were converging on this system, preparing to implement protocols that hadn't been used for millennia. They were planning to sterilize the entire system. Admiral, he transmitted, I am detecting massive fleet movements throughout Council space. It appears they are implementing final solution protocols. Elena's expression hardened. How long do we have? Assuming standard mobilization procedures, approximately 72 hours before the main force arrives. They will bring enough firepower to destroy this entire stellar region. Then we need to be ready for them. Elena's voice carried a note of determination that reminded Kethmore why humans had survived every challenge their galaxy had thrown at them.
Grand Admiral, I'm going to ask you one more time.
Will you help us prepare for what's coming? Kethmore considered the tactical situation objectively. A massive council fleet, armed with planet-killing weapons, approaching a system where the most advanced military and scientific minds from 40 species were working together to create technology that exceeded anything in galactic history. It wasn't a battle, it was the birth of a new galactic order. "Admiral," he transmitted, "what do you need from me?" Elena's smile was brilliant. "Everything you know about coordinating multi-species fleet operations. We're going to need it." The final phase of the transformation began with Kethmore's integration into the human alliance, bringing with him the command and control expertise that had made the Hegem